You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Doge, and more. Cryptocurrencies and digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments throughout the world's leading crypto derivatives markets. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amber Data. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amber Data delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amber Data eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of crypto derivatives. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again with the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we go a little bit beyond our traditional stomping grounds and explore what's going on in the crypto derivatives markets. We're going to talk about the volume, the volatility, some unusual activity, the skew, all that goodness, and a whole bunch more. My name, of course, Mark Longo, from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as from the ever-compelling, ever-educational, at least we tend to think so, Options Insider Radio Network. Reminding you a couple of things right at the top here. If you like what you hear, A, keep throwing some stars or comments or likes, reviews, whatever they allow you to do on your platform of choice. It does help new people continue to discover the content. And B, if you want a little more in your lives, and who can blame you? At the end of the day, you want great pro Q&A sessions with some of the best minds in the world of options and derivatives. A lot of them overlapping into the crypto world. And of course, unusual activity, all kinds of good stuff. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go. Get in there soon, because the July Pro Trading Crate heading out the door soon. Get your name in the hat to potentially win that and all kinds of other fun stuff. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro. As we keep on going, just the facts, ma'am, this week, listeners, right on into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again to break down all the action in the world's leading digital asset. Yet we're talking about the big dog, which is Bitcoin, looking slightly bigger than it was on our show last week. At the end of our show last week, it was 29,077. Coming into the start of the show today, it was 29,184, up a whopping 106 handles. You'll know if you've been listening to this show or watching the crypto space for some time. Not a heck of a huge move show on show here this week. Got a little bit more action. Seems like the lion's share of the action last week was pretty much right before and right after our show last week. We hit our low right before showtime last week of 28,934, again, last Monday. And then the high came that same day. A lot of living all in one day, listeners. 30,093. So over 1,000-point intraday range. And then settling out for pretty much the rest of the week to come back right to where we were pretty much last week, plus or minus 106 handles. So an intriguing week. You could probably guess from those numbers I just laid down for your listeners. Vol not exactly exploding on the crypto scene coming into the start of the show. By the way, of course, all this data coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Amber Data. AmberData.io, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires if you want to see more of it for yourselves. And trust me, there's a lot more. We really just scratched the surface here on the show every week. Start of the show, 30-day vol in Bitcoin over there on Deribit, 32.5. That's down exactly 2.5 points. We're at a 35 this time last week. So not a lot of net action on the week. Also, it is seasonal, listeners. It is summertime after all. People like to pretend that the digital asset markets are completely non-correlated to the rest of the markets out there. But the truth is, a lot of the same people are slinging both. And they're not around right now. They're not doing much right now. So volume tends to dry up. Volatility tends to go into the doldrums around this time of the year. You know, late July into August, getting into the dog days of summer. And, of course, seasonally on the holiday period at the end of the year as well. Usually not banger periods for volume or for volatility. And we're pretty much seeing that right now. Going out a little bit farther on the chain, going out about 6 months. The vol out there a little bit shy of 44, about 43 3/4. It was a 46 on the show last week, so even a little bit longer term vol continuing to erode out there. Let's get out to the Skew, see if any interesting nuggets can be mined out there. Let's start very near dated and work our way out, shall we? Let's go out to the weekly Skew. That has been kind of hanging out pretty much flat for the last couple of weeks. It was not even negative a half on the show last week, so pretty much flat. And this week is about positive a quarter, so still pretty much flat. So the near-dated Bitcoin options not really showing you a huge bias in one direction or the other. Let's go a little bit farther out. Let's go out a month. And last week it was slightly positive, skewing up about 1.8, so almost plus 2, so slightly positive going out 30 days. This week it is literally flat. There's nothing to be found even going out a month. So I think the Skew taking the summer off here as well. Listen, let's go even farther. Let's go out 6 months, see if we can find anything interesting there. And last show, there still was some upside juice to be found 6 months out. It was a little bit north of 5 points, about 5.25 worth of points to the upside. So again, showing that those calls having about 5 points worth of premium over the puts. So a little bit of bias, a little bit of concern to the upside. This week, a lot of that has gone away as well. It's only about 2.5 points. So right now, looks like the summer squeezing a lot of the life out of the crypto derivatives market, at least in Bitcoin land. Of course, compound that with the fact that pretty much today is the last day of July. So we have July rolling off the board, another expiration cycle, taking with it a whole bunch of OI over there on Deribit. So coming into the start of the show, we have 173,000 calls left on Deribit. That's down about 23,000. And the puts, only about 74,000 of those left, down about 13,000 as well. So expiration taking a lot of paper with it. Now, when we look at the top open interest movers, the top 5 strikes, it is all gainers. And again, that's kind of, I think, a bit of a adjustment they make in the Amber Data platform to adjust for expiration. Next time we get Greg on the show, I want to confirm that with him there. But it's an intriguing area to look at the top movers. Because once again, we have all gainers on the show this week. Number 5, we have the 31,000 calls. Looks like, actually, no, there are some puts making their way into the top 5 this week, which is interesting to see. But the number 5, we have the 31,000 strike calls. They gained 1,350 contracts since our show last week. Number 4, the 29,000 strike puts, gaining 1,400 contracts. Number 3, the 26,000 strike puts. They gained 1,600 contracts. Number 2, back to the calls, 32,000 strike calls. They gained 2,300 contracts. And the big OI gainers, such as it was on a kind of a quiet week where a lot of OI went away, the 30,000 strike calls, they gained 5,100 contracts. And again, that makes sense. Psychologically important level at the end of the day, listeners. Let's get on out to product I know a lot of you like to use to play a little bit of the old Bitcoin. That is Bitto, 15.5 when we kicked off the show, down about exactly half a point from where it was a week ago. Volume-wise, starting to come back in again. Again, summertime, not much going on. We started to see some action, all this SEC enforcement stuff going on. That drove some paper In fact, headlines coming out today from FT and others that Coinbase says SEC told them to pretty much delist all other cryptocurrencies other than Bitcoin from their platform, which they say would have effectively killed pretty much a lot of the crypto business in the U.S., and they probably have a point there. They are the primary vector for a lot of people to access a lot of these other cryptocurrencies out there, so a little bit of drama there, but again, not driving a lot of paper in any of these assets across the board. Looking at BITO right now, again, 15.5 down about half a point. The ADV also coming in, so we're not seeing the volume bump on some of these regulatory nuggets that you might expect. Again, seasonally quiet period, listeners. 35,000 contracts is the ADV in BITO right now. It's down 11,000 this time last week, so things are getting kind of quiet out there. You want to see how BITO compares and stacks up with some other crypto derivatives players out there, some other ways you might be using and other names you might be using to sling some crypto options in your securities account. Stay tuned for our crypto questions. Going to pay off our question of the week. It was a surprising one, I will admit that. Today, we're seeing about 32,000 contracts on the tape out there in BITO land, so maybe a little bit more action. Actually, you know what? Something just went up out there because since the start of the show to now, it just ticked up to 49,000 contracts. Interesting. And the vol out there, intriguingly enough, actually up. It's up to about 1.5 points to 38.5. So a little bit of a dichotomy between what we're seeing out on Deribit and what's going on right now on BITO. Looks like the big dog today, listeners, we are going to XDiv in BITO. So that is part of the issue out there, also why it's probably selling off. 13,450 of the 15.5 calls expiring this Friday just pretty much went up. So that's where it looks like the lion's share of the action is. Speaking of that XDiv, it's an interesting conversation. We talked about it on the Options Bootcamp last week. I encourage you to check it out. But it did surprise a lot of people that BITO does pay a dividend. That surprises people. And I looked at it to seeing how regular it was lately. That actually surprised me a little bit too. It's been effectively a monthly dividend. And you might say, why does this thing pay a dividend? And it's because, quite frankly, they hold these futures on CME at the end of the day, and the structure of the entity that owns those futures, it cannot hold a profit. So on months when Bitcoin futures are rallying, remember, they're buying those futures and rolling them all the time. So when they have a profit from doing that, they have to distribute that to the shareholders. So lately, those dividends have been fairly robust. Again, a lot of that due to the fact that Bitcoin has gone up. But if you hold BITO right now, you're getting somewhere around 14.25%, I think, was the annual dividend yield. So not bad. Again, that's not guaranteed. That depends on what's going on out there month to month on the old Bitcoin front. But intriguing and perhaps makes people look at BITO a little bit differently. Speaking of looking at BITO, let's look right now and see what the top positions are out there. Let's do a top 5 so we can keep on rolling into the altcoin universe. Number 5, again, it's all calls all the time, by the way, even if you expand to a top 10. No puts to be found, which is interesting. Number 5, 27,000 of the Jan 15s. Number 4, 40,000 of the Jan 25s. Number 3, 58,000 of the Jan 65s. Number 2, 62,000 of the Jan 35s. Again, these are Jan 2025 now. And the number 1 position in BITO right now, 80,000 of the Jan 2025 30 calls. If you bought those calls long-term, listeners, that's interesting, especially with these aggressive dividends we're talking about out there right now. That does eat into those calls and how they perform. So makes it a little bit more challenging to hold over the long term, which is interesting. Speaking of interesting, let's see if we can find any interesting nuggets when we explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, a portion of the show where we explore everything going on outside of the big dog, which is Bitcoin, except for right now when we break down the size names from a market cap perspective. You can't really avoid Bitcoin in that conversation, listeners. And if we do that, we are greeted with some interesting players. Again, Tron holding down the top 10 spot. Cost you a little bit shy of $7 billion to break into the top 10 again. It's about $6.9 billion. That gets you to Tron. So that barometer to break into the top 10 has steadily eroded of late. Number 9, Solana still holding on to that spot. $9.6 billion worth of market cap. Number 8, Cardano, $10.9 billion. Number 7, Doge. So Doge climbing the ranks. It's been number 8 for how long, listeners? Doge fighting its way to number 7 this week, $10.9 billion. So technically Cardano a little bit shy of 10.9, 10.89 to be precise. Dogecoin coming in at 10.97. So there you go. Number 6, USD coin, $26 $1.4 billion worth of market cap. Number 5, XRP, 36.9, still hanging out around that 70-cent level. You know, there's other swords waiting to drop out there in XRP, but got a little bit of a pop. You can't be mad. 40-odd cents to 70-odd cents. Not the worst thing. You've been waiting for a long time, so you got something at least. Number 4, BNB, 37.25 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, 83.8 billion. Number 2, it's ETH, 223.5 billion, and the big dog, Bitcoin, 567.6 billion. Down ever so slightly right now on the day, and on the week, we know, having pretty much a quiet week, gaining a whopping 100 handles, so up ever so slightly on the week. Let's get out to ETH, see what's cooking out there. Interestingly enough, ETH wasn't mentioned in all the other assets that the SEC asked Coinbase to delist. Of course, if you read into that, that would imply ETH, but specifically in their filings, they did not list Ether, which is intriguing. They listed 12 crypto asset securities in their lawsuit. Well, that's against Binance as well. So yeah, they've been, I guess, a little bit mum on ETH, which again is a big one, I know, for a lot of you out there. Looking slightly bigger this week than it was last week. It was 1847 at the end of our show last week, 1860 this week, so up a whopping 12 handles on the week. So kind of a similar story in ETH right now to what we saw for Bitcoin for the week. Same deal for ETH as well in terms of having its highs and lows last Monday. The low came before showtime, 1836. The high came after our show concluded, 1889. So you're not talking a huge range there. So spoiler alert, vol continuing to come in, listeners. It was a 33 on our show last week, 31 right now. So no joy to be found on the vol front. Let's go a little bit farther out. Let's go 6 months, see if we find any juice there. And same deal there, 43 right now, 44.7 last show, so down 1.7 points. So doesn't matter really where you look, vol continuing to come in. Let's go out to the Skew, see if we see any interesting biases lurking out there. And the answer is kind of. Looking at the weekly Skew first, it was biased to the dark side last week, about negative 1.5 points. So not a huge bias, but something. This week that has extended. It's down to almost negative 3, negative 2.75 right now. So looking like a little bit of a near-term downside bias in the options. Let's go a little bit farther out. Let's go a month. Let's see if that holds true. And the answer is yes there as well. It was negative 1 on the show last week, negative 2 this week. So you're not talking huge numbers, but in these quiet summer doldrum periods, it's worthy of note. And going out farther, though, that's where it kind of falls off. 6 months, the Skew was 2 points to the positive last week. This week, it is literally flat, no bias whatsoever. So I guess you can read into that positive upside bias is going away, which would in turn be negative. But right now, it's still flat. Intriguing stuff out there in ETH. How are you positioning right now in ETH, listeners? Are you looking a little bit upside, a little bit of downside? Are you flat? Hit us up, let us know. What is not flat is the OI. It continues to come in, listeners. Again, expiration always hits ETH even harder, especially on the quarterlies. This was not a quarterly, thankfully, but still a lot of paper going the way of the dodo. Right now, we have sub 2 million calls open on Deribit, 1.92 million. It's down about 80,000 from this time last week. The puts, 542,000. That's down 84,000 as well. So they really coming for the puts out there right now. So we're still looking roughly 4-to-1 calls over puts out there on Deribit. So intriguing stuff on the ETH front. Looking at the OI, the top 5 OI movers in ETH. Looks like this one, interestingly enough, all calls this week, listeners. Number 5, we have the 2,300 calls. They gained 19,000 contracts. Number 4, we have the 2,800 calls. They gained 22,000 contracts. Number 3, we have the 2,500 calls. They gained 34,000 contracts. Number 2, the 2,200 calls. They gained 37,000 contracts. And the big dog this week, the 1,900 calls. They gained 65,000 contracts on the week. Let's keep on rolling with some of these other altcoin universe names, and we'll get to some of your results from our very interesting question of the week. Solana right now, a little bit shy of 24, 23.93. It was 23.41 last show, so up a whopping 52 cents on the week. XRP, 70 cents last week, 70 cents this week, so no joy really there, listeners. Dogecoin, as you mentioned, getting a little bit of a lift, almost 7.5 cents last week, 7.8 cents this week, so up slightly, but enough to catapult it. Send it rocketing north to the number 7 spot in the top 10, listeners. Litecoin, 89.08 last week, 92.53 this week, up about $3.45. So a nice little pop for Litecoin. Cardano, 30.4 cents last week, 31.1 cents this week, up a whopping 0.006 this week. Polkadot 5.25 last week, 5.13 this week, so down a little over a dime. And everyone's favorite Shiba actually catching an interesting lift. It was 0.0000076 last week. This week, 0.0000084. Shiba Lambos on the horizon. I guess we'll have to wait and find out, listeners. But we don't have to wait anymore to see the results of our question of the week. It is time for your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Questions. A very interesting one this week. We don't often make our question of the week crypto-oriented, but it seemed like a no-brainer this past week, given what was going on out there and some of the feedback we're getting from you folks. So we turned it to you over there at Options on Twitter is the place to go to play along with not just these, but every question of the week we have. We put out all of our content there as well. So if you're not following us at Options on Twitter, man, you're missing out, or I suppose X now, whatever they want to call it. But our question this week, there are many ways for options traders to get crypto exposure in their securities accounts. Mara, Riot, Coin, and Bitto are all popular choices. Of course, that's Marathon Digital listeners, Riot Blockchain, Coinbase, the aforementioned Coinbase, and of course, Bitto. All popular choices. But what is your weapon of choice for crypto options exposure? And if you don't see your favorite, of course, we always like you folks to write in. A lot of interesting write-ins. We had Henry, the Flowmaster, on the show last week, writing in about Hive. He wanted that one on the list, so intriguing one there. I thought Bitto would run away with this. After all, it is the most direct play for a lot of you to put in your securities account. That is also optionable. Some of you might like, for direct plays, you prefer the grayscale stuff, but no options on those, obviously, so they're kind of removed from this conversation. But what ended up happening, listeners, surprisingly, Mara just ran away with it. Good old Marathon Digital Holdings listeners just crushing it. Ticker symbol Mara, M-A-R-A. 35.2% of you choosing that one, followed by number 2, Coinbase, kind of the catch-all name we threw in out there, 29.6%. So between those two, dominating the tape, well over half, 64, almost 65% of you choosing one of those two names. Riot coming in number 3, 18.5%, and Bitto bringing up the rear, only 16.7%. That really surprised me. Now, if you look at the ADVs for some of these, not as surprising. You know, Mara, Riot, all these names going to do more options paper than Bitto does. Like right now, Mara listeners hanging out at $17.32. A nice little pop today, up about 61 cents or about 3.7%. The ADV out there, 247,000. So closing in on 250,000 contracts a day. So that's a lot of paper. So I could see why some of you might be lured just by that. Liquidity is a driving force at the end of the day. Liquidity begets liquidity. We've seen it all the time. The highest Bitto ever got was right around 100,000. So from a pure liquidity perspective, that makes some sense. Of course, if we get to Coinbase, our number 2 name, they're putting up even more paper, 283,000 contracts a day. So well north of 250,000. So liquidity-wise, probably see why those two taking the driver's seat. Let's go out to Riot Blockchain. That one, 159,000 out there. I guess Riot is now Riot Platforms. Riot Blockchain, old, dated name. They are $18.50 or so right now, kind of unched on the day. But again, good for 159,000 contracts a day. So all of them combining to do a lot more than Bitto, which is still hanging out, like we said, at about 35,000 contracts a day. So liquidity-wise, I suppose it doesn't come as that much of a surprise, but tracking-wise, at the end of the day, if what you're going for is something that tracks the underlying, you look at GLD and SLV, how popular they are for options traders and securities accounts because they track the underlying. They do a great job of doing it. Bitto, as we said before, does a surprisingly good job of doing that. The dividend throws an interesting added wrinkle into the works there, and yet all of that combining for a 4th place position in our poll. Kind of surprising. Are you surprised by this? I'm guessing by your votes, the answer is no. But it did surprise me. That's why we do the polls at the end of the day, listeners. You folks in the audience, you are the ultimate arbiters. And right now, you're choosing Mara. All right, that is going to do it for this Just the Facts, Ma'am edition of the Crypto Rundown. Of course, we'll be back later on this week with all of our usual assortment of content, listeners. You're going to get Options Boot Camp. You're going to get Pro Q&As. You're going to get the Option Block. Going to get This Week in Futures Options. Going to get Volatility Views for your pro folks. Going to get Options Oddities. Then we'll be back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.